April 19th, 1951. Washington has surrendered to euphoria. The spring air is thick with lilac and gasoline. Pennsylvania Avenue is a single living organism. Hundreds of thousands of people pressed shoulder to shoulder, waving tiny flags, shouting themselves hoarse. Children are hoisted onto fathers' shoulders to see the black Cadillac that creeps forward like a battleship through surf. Inside sits an old man in suntans and a crushed cap, corncob pipe clenched between his teeth, eyes fixed on some invisible horizon only he can see. The roar that follows him is the same roar that once greeted Caesar returning from Gaul, only louder. Because this is America, and the 20th century has taught it how to cheer. Douglas MacArthur has come home, and the country is ready to crown him. An hour later, the House chamber is a furnace of devotion. Every seat is taken, every aisle crammed with correspondents and admirals and society women wearing hats the size of radar dishes. Flashbulbs pop like machine gun fire. When MacArthur reaches the rostrum, the applause is a physical blow. It rattles the chandeliers and sets the television microphones trembling. He does not smile. He simply waits, the way he once waited for the tide to turn at Incheon, until the chamber has exhausted itself and falls into a hush of pure adoration. Then he speaks, and every word is a hammer. "There is no substitute for victory," he says, voice rolling out across the continent on live radio and the new miracle of television. "The enemy must be made to feel the full weight of our righteous might. We must carry the war to its source, to the very lair of the aggressor." The galleries erupt again. Senators who have spent 30 years guarding the nation's purse strings leap to their feet as if someone has yanked invisible strings. A congressman from Texas loses all dignity and screams, "Give 'em hell, Doug." The cry is taken up, a chant that rattles the windows. Tears stream down the cheeks of men who have not wept since the Argonne. Somewhere a woman faints from sheer emotion and is passed overhead like a battle standard. While the nation loses its mind in ecstasy, a different ritual is taking place 5 miles away beneath the Pentagon's 5-sided fortress. The basement war room smells of hot paper and cold coffee. Fluorescent tubes buzz overhead like dying insects. The walls are covered with acetate overlays of Korea, red arrows for Chinese divisions, blue arrows for the retreating 8th Army, black crosses for airfields that no longer exist. Teletypes clatter without pause, spitting out yards of yellow tape that coil on the floor like entrails. Omar Bradley sits alone at the long table. His 5-star uniform is immaculate, but the shoulders sag with a wariness no ribbon rack can hide. In front of him lies a folder stamped "Eyes Only," JCS Special Estimate 51-9. He turns the pages slowly, as though each sheet weighs 50 pounds. Page 7. If war is expanded north of the Yalu, Chinese ground intervention will rise from current 350,000 to an estimated 2.4 million within 90 days. Page 11. Soviet air regiments in Siberia and Port Arthur, capable of striking U.S. bases in Japan and Okinawa. 1,400 aircraft, including 180 Tu-4 bombers configured for atomic delivery. Page 14. Projected U.S. casualties, first 6 months widened conflict, 180,000 to 220,000 killed, wounded, missing. Page 18. Reinforcement capability to European theater if priority given to Far East. 0 combat-ready divisions for a minimum of 18 months. Bradley removes his glasses and pinches the bridge of his nose. He has seen casualty lists before, Ardennes, Normandy, the Rhine, but never numbers that read like an extinction event. A young major appears in the doorway, hesitant. "Sir, the Chief of Staff wants your immediate reaction to General MacArthur's address." Bradley's voice is quiet, almost a whisper. He just declared war on China to a standing ovation. "Gallup has him at 87% favorable, sir. Congress is preparing emergency appropriations." Bradley looks up. His eyes are the color of winter steel. 87% of the American people do not have access to this folder. The major swallows and leaves. That night, the White House is dark, except for the Oval Office. Harry Truman stands at the tall windows watching searchlights sweep the sky for a ticker-tape parade he never authorized. His reflection in the glass looks small and stubborn. "They're cheering the man who wants to drop atomic bombs on half of Asia," he mutters to his appointments secretary. "And I'm the son of a bitch who fired him." Across the Potomac, Bradley works beneath a single green banker's lamp. Fresh cables from Tokyo cover his desk like snowdrifts. MacArthur's latest demands: 34 atomic weapons on Manchurian airfields and supply centers, immediate naval blockade of the Chinese coast from Shanghai to the Soviet border, authorization to employ nationalist Chinese divisions in a second front, and written in the general's own impatient scrawl, removal of all political restraints on pursuit of total victory. Bradley underlines one sentence 3 times in red grease pencil: "Victory is within our grasp if Washington will only release the full power of American arms." He walks to the huge wall map and stands there a long time. His finger traces the thin black line of the 38th parallel, then drifts north to the dense cluster of Soviet divisions in East Germany, west to the ragged NATO line that exists mostly on paper, east to the empty blue expanse of the Pacific, where American carriers are already stretched to breaking. He sees the entire chessboard at once, the way he once saw the hedgerows of Normandy and the bridges across the Rhine. "You're looking only at your ocean, Douglas," he says to the silent room. "Some of us have to watch the whole world." General J. Lawton Collins slips in without knocking, face carved from granite. He told the Russell Committee this afternoon that the Joint Chiefs are in complete accord with his strategic concept. "That is a lie, Omar. An outright, bald-faced lie." Bradley's jaw flexes. He knows exactly what he's doing. Congress is ready to give him anything: money, bombs, a blank check written in blood. If we stay silent, we won't stay silent. Bradley's voice is soft, but it carries the weight of 5 European campaigns. "Schedule closed testimony first. If the Senate won't listen behind closed doors, we take it to open session. All of it. Every map, every estimate, every casualty figure." Collins hesitates. "Taking on MacArthur in public will finish a lot of careers, Omar. Maybe ours." Bradley looks back at the map, at the red arrows already lapping across the Yalu like a rising tide. "Careers end," he says. "Civilizations only get one chance." Collins leaves. The teletypes keep hammering. Another Chinese Army Corps, 50,000 men, has crossed the river under cover of darkness. The paper curls onto the floor like a white surrender flag no one is ready to raise. Bradley walks to the window. Washington glitters across the black water, serene, drunk, oblivious. He rests his forehead against the cold glass and closes his eyes. "I spent 6 years trying to keep the world from catching fire again," he thinks. "Now one man with a pipe and a press agent and a nation at his feet may strike the match." Somewhere in the bowels of the building, a new estimate lands on the duty officer's desk. Soviet atomic stockpile now believed to exceed 70 weapons. The fluorescent lights hum on, indifferent. But behind closed doors, one man knew the truth. The hero was wrong. Omar Bradley no longer sleeps in sheets. He sleeps in chairs, head bowed over classified folders, waking every time the secure telephone gives its low, sick buzz. The Pentagon at 3 a.m. is a cathedral of fluorescent hum and distant footsteps. He has come to prefer the company of maps to the company of men. Maps do not cheer for the wrong war. Tonight, the map on his wall is Europe. Not the Europe of 1944, when the Atlantic Wall still bristled with concrete and hope, but the Europe of 1951, a thin, trembling line of half-armed divisions stretching from the North Cape to Trieste. American units, 4 combat-ready divisions total. French, 8 divisions, most still wearing British battle dress and eating American rations. British, 2 divisions in Germany, 2 more trying to keep the empire from unraveling in Malaya and Kenya. German rearmament is still a whispered rumor that makes French stomachs knot. Bradley pins a new acetate overlay. Red symbols bloom like bloodstains. Soviet and satellite divisions, 175 of them, 2.4 million men under arms, 22,000 tanks. Against that, NATO can muster barely 30 divisions, and half of those exist only on paper and in optimistic briefings. He steps back and lights a cigarette, the first in 6 years, and watches the smoke drift toward the ceiling. The gesture feels like surrender. A soft knock. General Hoyt Vandenberg, Chief of the Air Force, slips inside carrying a leather tube. His eyes are red. He has been reading the same numbers Bradley has. "We just finished the air estimate you asked for," Vandenberg says, voice hoarse. He unrolls a chart across the table. "If we give MacArthur everything he wants, every bomber, every fighter wing, every stockpile, we can sustain maximum effort over Manchuria and northern China for approximately 45 days. After that, we are out of aviation fuel east of Hawaii, out of 500-pound bombs west of Guam, and out of pilots who can still see straight. 45 days, Omar, and then the cupboard is bare. Bradley studies the chart without blinking. And Europe? Vandenberg taps the empty spaces on the European map. The Strategic Air Command will be down to a few dozen atomic-capable B-29s, and those will be sitting on Japanese tarmacs with Chinese MiGs orbiting overhead. If the Soviets move in Europe while we are tangled up in Asia, London gets the first bomb, Paris the second, and we have nothing left to answer with. Bradley exhales smoke through his nose. He thinks air power is still 1945. Douglas thinks the world is still 1945, Vandenberg corrects. He thinks the oceans still protect us, that the Soviets will watch us bomb their ally and do nothing, that Britain and France will follow us into a third world war just because we ask nicely. Bradley stubs the cigarette out as if killing something small and poisonous. They won't. London is already drafting a demarche. Bevan told Atchison privately that if we bomb China, Britain will reconsider its entire alliance. France will bolt. The Dutch are terrified of Java going communist the moment we open a second front. The entire global order rests on one assumption, that America will not start a war it cannot finish. He walks to a locked safe, works the combination, and removes a thin folder marked Venona. Urgent. Inside are intercepted Soviet cables decrypted only weeks earlier. He hands Vandenberg a single sheet. Vandenberg reads aloud, voice dropping with every line. Directive to Far East Command, 28th of March, 1951. In the event of American strategic air offensive against People's Republic of China or Soviet territory, initiate immediate counteroffensive in Europe and Middle East. Atomic weapons authorized for tactical employment against troop concentrations and ports. Vandenberg looks up, pale. They've already decided. They decided the day we crossed the 38th parallel last fall, Bradley says. We just haven't given them the excuse yet. Silence pools between them, thick and cold. Bradley moves to another table where intelligence summaries are arranged like tarot cards. Chinese order of battle, 2.7 million men now committed or mobilizing. Nationalist Chinese divisions on Formosa, 500,000 poorly equipped troops who hate communists more than they love discipline. American ground forces in Korea, 150,000 exhausted men clinging to a line that buckles daily. Strategic atomic stockpile, 298 weapons, fewer than half configured for Far East delivery, most earmarked for Soviet cities under existing war plans. He touches each report like a priest touching relics. This is the real battlefield, he says quietly. Not the hills around Chosin, not the airfields in Manchuria. This room. These numbers. This silence. Vandenberg folds his arms. The Senate committee starts closed hearings tomorrow. MacArthur will repeat that the Joint Chiefs are united behind him. If we let that stand, it will not stand. Bradley's voice is flat, final. I will testify. Collins will testify. Sherman, you, whoever else they call. We lay every card on the table. Every casualty estimate, every Soviet intercept, every cable from London begging us not to do this. You know what they'll call you, Vandenberg says. Appeaser, defeatist, the man who stabbed MacArthur in the back. Bradley almost smiles. It is not a pleasant expression. They called George Marshall a lot of things in 1940 when he said we weren't ready. History eventually forgave him. I'm willing to wait. He walks to the window. Dawn is still hours away. The Potomac is black glass reflecting the lights of a capital that believes tomorrow will be another day of triumph. I was at Bastogne, he says, almost to himself. I watched good men freeze to death because someone higher up believed in miracles. I will not watch the world freeze because one man believes the atomic bomb is just a bigger artillery shell. Vandenberg gathers his charts. At the door he pauses. Omar, are you ready for what this will do to you? Bradley does not turn around. I was ready the day I read the first estimate that said widening the war would cost us Europe. Personal consequences stopped mattering somewhere around the 2 millionth projected casualty. The door closes. Bradley is alone again with the maps, the smoke, the low electric hum of a world teetering on decisions no one will thank him for making. He opens a fresh folder, tomorrow's testimony notes, and begins to write in his careful slanted hand. The first line is simple, almost gentle. The proposed course of action would take us into the wrong war, against the wrong enemy, at the wrong time in the wrong place. He underlines it once, twice, a third time, as though the pressure of the pen can drive the truth through oak and marble, and public adoration into the minds of men who no longer wish to hear it. Outside, the teletypes never stop. Another Soviet tank army has moved to forward deployment near Warsaw. Another Chinese division has crossed the Yalu. The numbers climb like floodwater. Bradley works on, hour after hour, preparing to stand in front of the nation and tell it the one thing it has forgotten how to hear. Sometimes the greatest courage is refusing to fight. By the time the sky over Arlington begins to pale, his testimony is finished. 43 pages, single-spaced, no rhetoric, no applause lines, just facts, cold and merciless as winter. He closes the folder, sets it squarely in the center of the desk, and for the first time in weeks allows himself one full breath. Stopping a legend might be the only way to stop a world war. May 1951. Room 216, Senate Office Building. The air inside is already stale at 9 in the morning. The windows are sealed for security, the doors guarded by Capitol Police who have never looked so grim. No cameras, no radio microphones, no gallery of cheering citizens. Just 30 senators, a handful of senior staff, and the long green table where history is about to be dissected with surgical knives. Douglas MacArthur enters first. He wears the same suntans and crushed cap he wore before Congress 3 weeks earlier, as though the uniform itself is a rebuttal to anyone who questions him. He nods to old friends, Russell of Georgia, Bridges of New Hampshire, then takes his seat like a monarch ascending a throne that happens to be made of oak and green leather. Flashbulbs are forbidden, yet somehow the room still feels too bright. Across from him, at the witness table, sit the Joint Chiefs in a deliberate row. Bradley in the center, Collins and Vandenberg on his right, Sherman of the Navy on his left. They have placed their briefcases in front of them like sandbags. Senator Russell gave the opening pleasantries hours ago. Now the questions begin, soft at first, almost reverent. MacArthur answers with the calm certainty of a man who has never lost a strategic argument in public. General, Senator Byrd asks, you have stated that the Joint Chiefs of Staff are in accord with your concept of operations. Is that still your understanding? MacArthur's eyes flick once toward Bradley, a flicker of warning, then return to the senators. I have been assured on multiple occasions, he says smoothly, that the professional military judgment of the chiefs supports the measures I have recommended. A pause. The room waits for the denial that does not come immediately. Bradley feels every eye settle on him, the way heavy artillery settles on a single grid square. Russell turns. General Bradley, the chair recognizes the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Bradley rises slowly. His notes are only a thin sheaf. He has memorized the rest. He does not look at MacArthur. He looks at the senators. Some friends, some political animals who smell blood and want to know whose. Mr. Chairman, he begins, voice low but carrying to the back row without effort. General MacArthur's statement is not correct. The Joint Chiefs of Staff have never, at any time, concurred in the strategic concept he has repeatedly advocated to this committee and to the public. A collective intake of breath, sharp as winter air. Russell's gavel hovers but does not fall. MacArthur's face is stone, yet the famous pipe trembles almost imperceptibly between his fingers. Bradley continues, measured, relentless. The course of action recommended: strategic bombardment of the Chinese mainland, naval blockade of the entire Chinese coast, introduction of nationalist Chinese forces, and the possible employment of atomic weapons, has been examined by the Joint Chiefs in detail. Our unanimous conclusion is that adoption of these measures would involve the United States in a general war with Communist China under conditions which would almost certainly provoke Soviet intervention on a global scale. He opens the first folder. Charts are passed hand to hand among the senators. Red arrows, blue arrows, casualty curves that climb off the page. Within 90 days, Bradley says, we would face a minimum of 4 million Chinese combatants in the field. Our present ground strength in the Far East could not hold the Korean Peninsula against such numbers without atomic support on a scale we do not currently possess in theater. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union maintains the capability to overrun Western Europe in a matter of weeks. Senator Morse, normally theatrical, is strangely quiet. General, are you telling this committee that General MacArthur's plan would leave NATO defenseless? Bradley meets his gaze. I am telling the committee that it would leave Western civilization defenseless. MacArthur leans forward, voice silk over steel. General Bradley is presenting a worst-case analysis constructed by staff officers who have never heard a shot fired in anger. I have fought the Chinese, Brace. I know what air power can accomplish when it is unleashed. Bradley turns to him for the first time. Their eyes lock, Pacific conquer against European grinder, glory against arithmetic. With respect, General, Bradley says, the Chinese you fought in 1945 no longer exist. The men across the Yalu are armed, trained, and supplied by a Soviet Union that now possesses the atomic bomb. And they are not fighting alone. He signals. An aide places a blow-up of the Venona intercept on an easel. The decrypted Soviet directive is stark in black and white. Atomic weapons authorized in response to American strategic offensive. MacArthur studies it without expression. Intelligence appreciations are notoriously unreliable. Perhaps, Bradley replies, but the lives of millions are not a suitable subject for improvisation. The afternoon wears on. Vandenberg testifies that the Air Force would be exhausted in 6 weeks. Sherman explains that a blockade of China would require every destroyer in the fleet, stripping the Atlantic bare. Collins details the ground equation. To hold a line in Korea against the coming Chinese offensive would require 15 American divisions we do not have and cannot move without abandoning Europe. Each witness is precise, courteous, devastating. MacArthur counters with eloquence and memory. Incheon, the Philippines, the sacred doctrine that wars are won only by annihilating the enemy's capacity and will to resist. Senators listen, some nodding unconsciously, caught between the pull of legend and the gravity of facts. At 4:17 p.m. the closed session adjourns. The senators file out pale and silent. No one claps MacArthur on the back today. That night, the committee votes unanimously to move the hearings into open session the following week. The decision is leaked before midnight. Newspapers that once demanded Truman's impeachment now print cautious headlines. Joint Chiefs break with MacArthur. In his temporary quarters at the Statler Hotel, MacArthur stands at the window watching searchlights sweep the Washington Monument. An aide brings coffee he does not drink. They have chosen caution over victory, he says to the glass. Across the river, Bradley sits alone in his office. The secure phone line to the White House is open. Truman's voice is hoarse with relief and worry. You did it, Omar. The country's going to hate you for a while, but you did it. Bradley stares at the map he has not left since morning. The red arrows still crawl south. Nothing on paper has changed, yet everything has. Mr. President, he says quietly, tomorrow the whole world will hear what we said today. And the day after that, the Chinese will still be coming. All we have bought is time. Truman is silent a moment. Sometimes time is the only victory there is. Bradley hangs up. He loosens his tie for the first time in 36 hours and walks to the window. Dawn is hours away, but already he can feel the storm gathering. The editorials, the hate mail, the cartoons of him measuring coffins while MacArthur weeps over a broken sword. He does not flinch. He has measured coffins before. In 3 days, the hearings will reopen to television cameras and a nation that still worships its hero. In 3 days, he will stand again and speak the sentence he has carried like a live grenade for weeks. He rehearses it once, softly, to the empty room. Wrong enemy, wrong place, wrong time, wrong war. The words feel heavier than any order he ever gave in Europe. Then Bradley took a breath, and history held its own. June 3, 1951. Room 216 again, but now the doors are open to the world. Television cables snake across the marble corridors like black pythons. 3 cumbersome cameras squat at the back, red lights glowing. The galleries are packed with correspondents who have flown in from London, Paris, Tokyo. Every seat is taken. Latecomers stand 3 deep along the walls. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of history being made in real time. The senators enter first, faces drawn. Richard Russell gavels the room to order, but the sound is swallowed by the low electric hum of a nation watching. Douglas MacArthur is already seated. He has not worn the crushed cap today. The famous braid gleams under the Klieg lights. He looks older in high definition, the theatrical mask stripped by merciless lenses. He knows what is coming. Bradley enters last. No drama, no flourish, just the quiet tread of a man who has not slept properly in a month. His uniform is pressed, his eyes bloodshot, his hands steady. He carries only a slim folder and a glass of water he will never touch. Russell clears his throat. The committee will come to order. General Bradley, you have the floor for as long as you require. Bradley does not rise at once. He looks slowly around the room, past the senators, past the cameras, past MacArthur, until his gaze settles on the small American flag pinned to the wall behind the dais. Then he stands. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, he begins, voice calm enough to sound almost conversational, yet every syllable carries to the back row without amplification. For the past 3 weeks, this nation has been asked to choose between two visions of its future. One is bold, decisive, inspiring. The other is cautious, limited, and, let us be honest, deeply unpopular. I am here to tell you why only one of those visions keeps the world from burning. He opens the folder, but he does not read from it. He has memorized every line. In the spring of 1945, we demanded unconditional surrender from Germany and Japan because we possessed overwhelming strength and because the oceans still protected us. In the spring of 1951, we face a different reality. The Soviet Union has the atomic bomb. The Chinese armies number in the millions. Our allies in Europe are only beginning to rearm. Our own forces are stretched across half the globe. Under these circumstances, to attempt the destruction of communist China would not be a war of decision. It would be an act of national suicide. A low rustle moves through the press tables, pencils scratching, wires humming to newsrooms across the country. Bradley lifts a single photograph, taken from a high-altitude reconnaissance plane. Endless columns of Chinese troops crossing the Yalu bridges at night, headlights off, moving like a dark river. This picture was taken 4 nights ago. 42 divisions in the last week alone. That is more men than we landed in Normandy on D-Day, crossing one river every 7 days. We do not have the ground forces to stop them in Korea if we widen the war. We do not have the air forces to destroy them in Manchuria without stripping Europe naked. We do not have the atomic stockpile to intimidate the Soviet Union into neutrality. We have only one thing left, the wisdom to recognize what we cannot do. Senator Saltonstall leans forward. General, are you saying there is no military solution in Korea? Bradley's answer is immediate, almost gentle. There is no total military solution that does not risk total war. And total war in 1951 is no longer a contest between armies. It is a contest between civilizations, and there would be no victor. He turns, for the first time, directly toward MacArthur. General MacArthur has spoken eloquently of victory. I share his hatred of communism. I share his frustration at fighting with one hand tied. But I must remind this committee and the American people that the Pacific is not the only ocean we must defend. While we are hypnotized by the hills of Korea, 2.5 million Soviet troops wait behind the Elbe. While we dream of bombing Manchuria, the cities of Western Europe lying naked beneath Soviet bombers that can reach them in minutes and return home before we know they have left the ground. The room is unnaturally quiet now. Even the correspondents have stopped writing. Bradley's voice drops, almost conversational again, yet every word lands like a falling beam. If we adopt the course urged upon us, we will fight the wrong enemy. China instead of the Soviet Union, in the wrong place. Asia instead of Europe, at the wrong time. Before our alliances are ready and our strength rebuilt, and we will be fighting the wrong war. A general war we cannot win without destroying everything we set out to save. He lets the silence stretch. 12 words. They hang in the air longer than any applause ever could. MacArthur stirs. The cameras swivel toward him like gun turrets. He rises slowly, deliberately, the old theatrical power still there. General Bradley has given you a counsel of fear, he begins, voice rich with contempt. I have spent 52 years in the service of this country, and I have never learned to measure victory by the number of divisions the enemy can throw at us. I have learned that free men, properly led and properly supported, can accomplish anything. He gestures toward the map of Asia. Here is the crucible. Here's where communism must be stopped. If we shrink from this test, we will fight again and again, on worse ground, at worse odds, until the light of freedom is extinguished everywhere. The galleries stir, a few correspondents nod despite themselves. The old magic still works. Bradley waits until MacArthur sits. Then he speaks again, quietly, almost sadly. I, too, have spent my life in the service of this country. I have seen what total war looks like when it's fought without restraint. I have walked the beaches where young Americans died because someone believed courage alone could substitute for preparation. I will not ask another generation to pay that price simply to satisfy a doctrine that belongs to a world that no longer exists. He closes the folder. Mr. Chairman, the Joint Chiefs recommend that the United States continue to fight a limited war in Korea for limited objectives: the restoration of the status quo and the containment of communist expansion. We recommend that we do so without widening the conflict into China proper, without employing atomic weapons except in the last extremity, and without sacrificing the recovery of Western Europe. That is not cowardice. That is survival. Russell's gavel falls once softly, as if afraid to disturb the silence that follows. The cameras linger on Bradley's face, tired, unyielding, utterly alone. Then they cut to MacArthur, staring straight ahead, jaw working around the stem of an unlit pipe. In newsrooms across the country, the teletypes begin hammering out the first bulletins. Bradley tells Senate, widening Korean War would be catastrophic, wrong war doctrine stuns nation. Joint Chiefs break decisively with MacArthur. That night, the editorial pages begin their slow, reluctant turn. The Chicago Tribune still rages, but the New York Times prints Bradley's 12 words in bold type across 8 columns. In London, the Times of London runs the headline, "America chooses restraint, world breathes again." In the White House, Harry Truman watches the late news alone, a glass of bourbon untouched in his hand. When Bradley's testimony ends, he speaks to the empty room. "Thank God," he whispers. "Thank God there was one man who wouldn't salute a mistake." Across the river, Bradley finally allows himself to sit. An aide brings coffee. He waves it away. He is staring at the same map he has stared at for months, but tonight the red arrows seem frozen, uncertain. He has won, he knows it, and he knows the price. Tomorrow the hate mail will start, the cartoons, the speeches accusing him of betraying a hero. None of it matters. A hero had fallen, not to bullets, but to truth. The hearings ended not with a bang, but with a slow exhalation. On June 25, 1951, the Senate committee issued its report, measured, sober, almost apologetic. It praised MacArthur's past service in language that would have made a Roman emperor blush, then quietly buried his strategic recommendations under 40 pages of classified estimates and unanimous Joint Chiefs testimony. The nation read the polite eulogy, shrugged, and turned the page. Within weeks, the name MacArthur no longer appeared on the front page unless it was about a parade route or a brand of bourbon. Douglas MacArthur himself left Washington the way he had arrived, in a black Cadillac, through streets that now waved out of habit rather than passion. He stood on the steps of the Waldorf Astoria that autumn and told a small crowd that history would vindicate him. History, busy with other things, barely looked up. Omar Bradley went home to a quiet house in Arlington and slept for 14 hours straight. When he woke, the world was still there. Korea dragged on for 2 more blood-soaked years, but it never widened. The Chinese came south in human waves that broke against the same ridgelines again and again, and American boys died by the thousands for hills no one could pronounce. Yet the war stayed inside its cage. No atomic fire fell on Harbin. No Soviet tanks rolled across the Elbe. London and Paris kept their streetlights on. NATO grew from a paper alliance into something that could actually fight. By 1953, the United States had 15 divisions in Europe instead of 4, and the first German battalions were drilling under a new flag. The balance of terror hardened into the long, cold equilibrium that would be called, without irony, peace. In July 1953, the armistice was signed at Panmunjom. The line on the map looked almost exactly like the line in 1950. Only now it was fertilized with 50,000 American dead and perhaps 3 million Korean and Chinese. Reporters asked Bradley whether it had all been worth it. He answered with a single sentence that no one bothered to print twice. Every life we spent buying time saved 100 million we never had to spend. He retired the following month, turning over the chairmanship to Ridgway without ceremony. There was no parade for Omar Bradley, no ticker tape, no invitations to address joint sessions of Congress. The hate mail slowed to a trickle and then stopped. Schoolchildren who could recite MacArthur's Old Soldier's speech by heart had never heard Bradley's name. That was how he wanted it. Years passed. The doctrine he spoke into existence on that June afternoon, limited war for limited objectives, containment instead of rollback, alliances before crusades, became the unspoken grammar of American strategy. When Kennedy stared down Khrushchev over Cuba, when Johnson wrestled with escalation in Vietnam, when Reagan rebuilt the fleet and the missiles, they were all operating inside the lines Bradley had drawn with 12 quiet words in 1951. No president ever thanked him publicly. None needed to. The world simply stayed intact. In the spring of 1964, a young reporter from CBS cornered Bradley at a small ceremony in Carlisle Barracks. The old general was 71 now, thinner, stooped, but the eyes were still winter steel. "General," the reporter asked, "do you consider yourself the man who prevented World War III?" Bradley looked at him for a long moment, as though translating the question from a foreign language. "I was one man who refused to salute a mistake," he said finally. "The rest was luck and the good sense of a lot of people who never get statues." He walked away before the camera could catch the faint tremor in his hand. He died in 1981, quietly, the way he had lived after 1951. The New York Times gave him 6 paragraphs on page 18, wedged between a story about interest rates and an advertisement for lawn furniture. The obituary called him the soldier, and mentioned Normandy, the Bulge, and Korea in that order. One sentence near the end noted that he had once played a significant role in the MacArthur hearings. Nothing more. Yet every April, when the cherry blossoms fall along the Potomac, a small, unmarked car parks near the Pentagon's river entrance. An elderly Army driver gets out, opens the rear door, and waits while a very old man in a plain gray suit walks slowly to the Korean War Memorial. He stands in front of the steel statues of the poncho-clad infantrymen, hands clasped behind his back, and remains there for exactly 12 minutes. No one ever disturbs him. The guards have quiet orders. He is counting, though no one has ever asked him what. He is counting the wars that never happened. He is counting the cities that never burned. He is counting the nights London and Paris and New York went to sleep without air raid sirens. And if, on some of those April evenings, the wind carries the faint scent of lilac and distant pipe smoke across the water, the old man never mentions it. The bravest act is not starting a war, it is stopping one before it begins. History remembers the battles that were fought. It forgets the battles that were refused. Bradley saved humanity by refusing to follow a legend. Strategy is not strength. Strategy is survival. The war he prevented is the victory we never see, but always owe. In the long ledger of the 20th century, where columns of the dead stretch into the millions, there is one blank page that belongs to him alone. No marble marks it. No bugle sounds. Only the quiet hum of a world that kept turning because one exhausted man in a fluorescent-lit room looked at the abyss, measured it exactly, and said, "No, not this time. Not while I'm breathing." If you love hidden Cold War stories, the decisions made in silence, the catastrophes that never made the headlines, subscribe. More forgotten brilliance is coming.